I work as a principal specialist at the Multilateral Investment Fund of the Inter-American Development Bank Group, where I coordinate activities aimed at advancing microcredit and financial inclusion throughout Latin America and the Caribbean. In this condition, I have had the opportunity to work with several Brazilian institutions and get to know the sector here and learn about the challenges and opportunities here. So I was very honored when I was invited to be a moderator of this panel. Before moving forward, I want to take the opportunity to congratulate the organizers, particularly Central Bank and SEBRAE, for putting together such an impressive forum with a number of people that is growing year by year. I also want to thank them in my name and that of the panelists for inviting us to this session. This panel will look, as I said, to the microcredit challenges and innovative solutions. Yesterday, we heard from Carlos Alberto dos Santos from SEBRAE, a very interesting presentation where he indicated that there is a growing demand for credit arising both at micro-entrepreneurs, micro-enterprises and small enterprises as several changes are taking place in their structure. He also mentioned that demand is becoming increasingly more conscious of the services that they receive and becoming increasingly more aware of the types of services that they need to be delivered to them, which is putting additional challenges on micro-entrepreneurs. This panel will address successful business models used in Latin America and other parts of the world. The panelists will share experiences on how different methodologies have been used and improved in different contexts to reach different client segments, adapting to market conditions and allowing, in this way, a path for sustainable growth of microfinance services. A special emphasis will be placed in exploring how these global experiences can be useful to the local Brazilian context. Today we will have three distinguished speakers representing different organizations and perspectives who will make individual presentations, and after their presentations there will be a session of questions and answers and discussions to explore their views in more detail. We welcome the audience to ask questions. The questions can be made in writing, so through papers that will be circulated. So please, if you have a question, fill out those paper cards and give them to the assistants that will be circulating and pass them here to the panel members. The speakers we have are Marisol Fernández. She is the country manager in Bolivia for Oikocredit, which is the Ecumenical Developmental Cooperative Society. This is a position she holds since 2006. Oikocredit is an organization dedicated to financing international development projects aimed at improving small and medium-sized enterprises through funding provided to producer associations and cooperatives. For the past 5 years, Marisol has also been a member of the board of directors of Banco FIE, one of Bolivia's most recognized microfinance institutions. Marisol has a master's degree in international economics and development from Boston University in the United States and 2 undergraduate degrees, one in economics and one in political science from the same university, where she graduated with summa cum laude. Marisol has an extensive work experience in the Bolivian public sector. She has worked, among others, for the Bolivian Congress, for the Bolivian Ministry of Finance, where she, as well as for the Bolivian financial sector regulator, where she was Director of Liquidation and Resolution of Financial Institutions, and later the Director in charge of implementing the Basel Accords. Later she has also done several consultancies in a number of countries, including Mozambique, Tanzania, Guatemala, Ecuador, and Bolivia for a number of institutions. We also have Federico Bilder from Access Holding. Federico has a master's degree in Management and Public Policy from the London School of Economics and has worked extensively in micro, small, and medium enterprise finance in Africa, Central Asia, and Latin America for more than 12 years. Since 2013, Mr. Bilder serves as head of SME at LFS Financial Systems and supports the sustainable expansion of micro, small, and medium enterprise finance in the 8 access banks of the company's network. He has a successful track record in the implementation of numerous technical assistance projects, financial sector assessments, as well as evaluation missions. Mr. Bilder has carried out numerous micro, small, and medium enterprise capacity building assignments worldwide, setting up MSME departments in commercial banks as well as microfinance institutions. Furthermore, he has designed and co-managed a MSME credit guarantee fund. Finally, we have Jennifer Morgan. Jenny is an independent consultant working for the SEEP network. SEEP network is an association of networks, microfinance networks. Previously, Jenny worked for the SEEP network itself, where she served as Director of Association Services, implementing programs to strengthen the operational, technical, and financial capacities of national and regional microfinance associations as a means to promote the development of local microfinance industries. Programs supported include responsible finance through local leadership in Sub-Saharan Africa in partnership with the MasterCard Foundation, the Brazil Network Strengthening Program with Citibank Brazil and the Citi Foundation, also the Citi Network Strengthening Program, as well as the Global Capacity Building Program for Microfinance Networks. Prior to SEEP, Jenny worked in the domestic microfinance sector, where she managed a financial education and business counseling program for microfinance clients at Training Resources and Advising Center of Acción. Jennifer received her master's in public administration with a focus on nonprofit management from New York University and her bachelor degree in international studies from Middlebury College. So without further ado, we will start the session and we'll ask Marisol to do a presentation on the experiences of the Bolivian microfinance market.
Muito obrigado, Fernando. Eu vou tentar fazer a apresentação em português, melhor dito, em bom portunhol. E peço muitas desculpas pelos erros que eu possa cometer. O propósito dessa apresentação é mostrar para vocês o que tem acontecido na Bolívia em dos mercados das microfinanças com maior crescimento na América Latina. Primeiro, eu vou falar muito curto acerca dos antecedentes da Oikocredit, quem é a minha organização, o contexto da Bolívia, para vocês poderem ver as similitudes ou as diferenças com o Brasil, o desenvolvimento e principais fatores para o sucesso das microfinanças na Bolívia, uma coisa importante para tomar em conta em um mercado como o Brasil, que agora está em desenvolvimento, as metodologias aplicadas no microcrédito, críticas e desafios ao modelo atual e como a Oikocredit apoia o setor das microfinanças. Quem é o Oikocredit? Nós somos uma sociedade cooperativa ecumênica de desenvolvimento a nível internacional com mais de 30 anos de antiguidade. O nosso objetivo é o financiamento de projetos de desenvolvimento através de empréstimos em empresas medianas e pequenas, cooperativas, associações e instituições de microfinanças. Nós temos um portfólio de cerca de 611 milhões de euros, com 806 projetos a nível mundial, em 63 países. Temos uma oficina aqui também, no Brasil, em São Paulo. Temos presença física em 35 países, com escritórios regionais e do país. Eu represento o escritório do país da Bolívia. Temos também 596 sócios, que são os contribuidores em 15 países. Quem são os nossos contribuidores? São igrejas, instituições também afiliadas às igrejas, outro tipo de instituições e também a sociedade em geral dos países europeus, Japão, Canadá, Estados Unidos e Austrália. O financiamento que otorga o Oikocredit está dirigido principalmente para as entidades das microfinanças. Atuamos como um banco de segundo piso. Também fazemos financiamentos diretos para o setor da agricultura, comércio e outros. Na Bolívia, o portfólio atual de carteira é ao redor de 40,1 milhões de euros. E o Brasil, atualmente, tem 10,2 milhões de euros. É uma grande diferença se nós comparamos que o Brasil, pois mais que quintuplica geograficamente a Bolívia. Vamos passar para o segundo ponto, relacionado com o contexto da Bolívia. O bom, o ruim, e não vamos falar do feio, mas vamos falar do bonito. O bom, nós temos tido estabilidade macroeconômica com crescimento do PIB em 5% nos últimos 5 anos. O Brasil, segundo a data que me foi proporcionada, só no 2010, teve um crescimento maior a 7,5%. Nos outros anos, o crescimento do PIB no Brasil foi menor a 2%. A Bolívia é um país pequeno. Só temos 10,2 milhões de habitantes, comparado com 202,7 milhões de habitantes no Brasil. Os 67% da população estão nas áreas urbanas. Unicamente 33% na área rural. O Brasil, 84% da população está concentrada nas cidades. A outra diferença importante é que 68% da população na Bolívia é indígena. A população economicamente ativa na Bolívia são 3,7 milhões, isso representa o 36,3%. E uma diferença importante é que 74% são empregados por conta própria. O que estou mostrando com isso é que o setor informal é muito importante na Bolívia e tem sido o impulsor do crescimento econômico. Qual é a parte que nós podíamos dizer o ruim? A topografia, a agricultura, representa 15% do PIB e 5% do emprego. Temos tido, e vocês devem conhecer isso, instabilidade política, social e histórica. Somos famosos por isso. Elevados índices também de corrupção. Calificamos no número 108 de 187 países no Índice de Desenvolvimento Humano da ONU. Somos um país bastante pobre. As vendas de folha de coca representam ao redor de 2% do PIB e, nos últimos anos, tem incrementado a produção da cocaína. Mas com esses fatores, o que é o bonito da Bolívia? O nosso índice de pobreza se reduziu do 35% a 29% nos últimos anos. Pelo índice de pobreza, estou falando dos ingressos de $4 por dia. Temos uma história de sucesso das microfinanças, com um dos mais altos índices de penetração na América Latina. Somos um exemplo na região respeito às microfinanças. O nosso sistema financeiro é bastante competitivo, com mais de 70 entidades privadas, entre bancos comerciais, bancos para a pequena e mediana empresa, organizações não governamentais, cooperativas e mutuais. Quais têm sido os fatores para o desenvolvimento das microfinanças na Bolívia? A microfinanças, a origem da microfinanças na Bolívia surgiu com a crise econômica dos 70s e 80s, onde tivemos uma hiperinflação e o fechamento da banca pública. Por outro lado, a recusa de bancos tradicionais de chegar aos segmentos não atendidos. Isso deu origem a uma migração rural, crescente desemprego e informalidade. Então, se deu o surgimento de pequenos serviços financeiros para pessoas de baixos recursos. Mas isto não aconteceu se não houvéssemos tido capitais, tanto do setor privado e da cooperação internacional. Assim, em 1978, nasceu uma das instituições líderes, a Rede. Em 1985, o FIE. Em 1986, o PRODIN. Em 1992, o Banco Sol. E foi a decolagem das microfinanças. Nós temos agora entidades como organizações não governamentais que só otorgam crédito, e temos outro tipo de entidades também especializadas, não chamadas agora instituições de desenvolvimento financeiro e bancos especializados na microfinança. Eles, a parte do crédito, operam com poupança. Os principais fatores para o sucesso do setor na Bolívia pode-se dizer que foram as tecnologias creditícias e a estreita relação com os clientes. Isso permitiu baixos índices de atrasos, baixos índices de carteira em risco. O forte crescimento do capital, etc., do patrimônio das entidades, a redução de custos internos com resultado de menores juros a clientes. A Bolívia tem uma das mais baixas juros promédio na região. Nós começamos ao redor do 46% e agora nós temos juros que estão em promédio ao redor do 15%. Uma regulação em normas específicas não restritivas. Isso foi muito importante para impulsar o setor. Por outro lado, um sistema de autorregulação. Esse sistema permitiu a eficiência operativa nas entidades. Inicialmente, estas entidades especializadas na microfinanças não estavam reguladas, mas elas decidiram, por conta própria, implantar um sistema de autorregulação com muitas similitudes em indicadores financeiros também propostos pelo ente regulador. Mas o mais importante de tudo, como um fator que deve ser tido em conta, é o compromisso social das mesmas entidades. Esse compromisso social se relaciona com o atendimento à população de menor recurso. Sem esse compromisso social, essas entidades podiam estar proibidas de fazer operações. O alto compromisso social deu pé para que o regulador abrisse a normativa e olhasse o setor de forma positiva. Outro fator importante foi a profissionalização das próprias entidades e das pessoas que trabalham em elas. Finalmente, esses fatores permitiram o crescimento do microcrédito. A carteira atualmente representa 1/3 do total do sistema e os clientes das microfinanças representam 10% da população total. Como ponto quarto, eu quero falar a respeito das metodologias aplicadas no microcrédito na Bolívia. O microcrédito iniciou com a banca comunal, mais conhecida internacionalmente como o Village Banking. O Village Banking é uma metodologia em que se outorga pequenos empréstimos a clientes muito pobres dentro de um grupo, e o grupo está garantizando àquele cliente individual. Uma das características mais importantes é que também, a parte do crédito, se outorga uma educação, um training aos clientes em diferentes matérias, como pode ser educação financeira, sexualidade, gênero, saúde, etc. Depois, a metodologia foi se desenvolvendo e as entidades passaram muitos de utilizar a banca comunal a crédito grupal ou associativo. E, finalmente, aquelas mais desenvolvidas passaram ao crédito individual. Mas tem tido também exemplos muito específicos de entidades que empeçaram diretamente com o crédito individual. É importante mencionar que essas metodologias não é que são uma ciência totalmente escura e que foi desenvolvida na Bolívia. Todas as metodologias de microcrédito, em geral, são as mesmas. A diferença é como as pessoas que trabalham em cada entidade de microfinanças se relacionam com o seu cliente. É a parte humana que faz a diferença. Finalmente, nas metodologias, é importante mencionar as 5 Cs, relativas ao cliente, capacidade de pago, o colateral, o capital e as condições do crédito. Quais foram, então, o impacto das microfinanças na Bolívia? E, em geral, a nível mundial. Na unidade familiar, a formação de riqueza, melhoras na saúde, educação, nutrição e moradia. A nível individual, o empoderamento, autoestima, liderança, destrezas empresariais. Na unidade econômica, impacto econômico, criação de emprego, maior renda, formação de patrimônio. Tudo isso permitiu que o setor informal na Bolívia cresça e não caia debaixo da linha da pobreza. E, por último, o empoderamento de grandes setores da população de baixos recursos, especialmente mulheres. Quais são as críticas e desafios ao modelo atual? Atualmente, o modelo financeiro na Bolívia tem fomentado maiormente atividades de comércio e serviços. A falta de financiamento para o desenvolvimento do setor produtivo não foi resolvida. A concentração da atividade financeira maiormente nas 3 principais cidades do país. Que desafios enfrenta agora o sistema? Aprofundar a inclusão financeira nas áreas rurais, prevenir o sobreendeudamento nos clientes e manter a sustentabilidade nas instituições microfinanceiras. Uma coisa importante para dizer aqui é que o ano passado foi aprovada a nova Lei de Serviços Financeiros na Bolívia e se introduziram muitos câmbios ao ordenamento do sistema financeiro relacionados com a função social dos serviços financeiros, onde se define que as entidades devem cumprir balanços sociais e destinar, ademais, uma porcentagem das utilidades para funções sociais. Se introduz o conceito também da inclusão financeira e se estabelecem limites máximos e mínimos de carteira de crédito para setores específicos, o produtivo e a moradia social, e teto de juros em créditos e poupança, entre outros. Finalmente, como a Oikocredit apoia ao setor das microfinanças? Como eu disse no início, nós temos oficinas regionais e no país, e na Bolívia, isso aqui é a carteira total dos financiamentos do funding que o Oikocredit tem otorgado ao setor das microfinanças. O impacto do nosso apoio na atividade econômica, como vocês veem, o funding maiormente está dirigido às entidades microfinanceiras, e com esse funding nós chegamos aos setores agrícola, de serviços e comércio, e também produtivo e outros. Eu vou passar isso aqui. Também nós contamos com um programa de assistência técnica. No caso da Bolívia, o número de intervenções desde o 2010 a 2013 e as diferentes entidades que se beneficiaram dessa assistência técnica. Isso é um pouco de história para que vocês possam ver que também esse tipo de programas surgem aqui no Brasil. E também atividade de desempenho social, através de seminários, workshops e outro tipo de atividades relacionadas com o tema social. Muito obrigada pela sua atenção.
Gracias. Thank you, Marisol. We'll now invite Federico Bilder from Access Holding to make his presentation.
A primeira coisa, muito obrigado pelo convite do Banco Central e seus parceiros. É um prazer para mim estar com vocês. Vou continuar com a apresentação em inglês. E a primeira coisa que... Well, the first thing that I would like to do is basically to change the name of the panel. I mean, it was mentioned that it was microcredit, sorry. And I want to talk about microfinance and SME finance, and which are the challenges and the innovative solutions that we can talk about it. I will tell you afterwards why I'm talking about MSME finance instead of microcredit. Now, a little bit about us. We are a company based in Berlin, which is a private company, although the shareholders include the International Finance Corporation, the European Investment Bank, and the BNDES from Germany, KfW, the ones from Holland, FMO, and the ones from the United Kingdom, CDC. So basically, we are supported also by multilateral agencies. Now, we have a network of banks outside this region. Basically, we have 9 banks, most of them operating in Africa, 6 banks there, plus 3 banks in Central Asia. We are a strategic investor in microfinance and SME finance, and one of the big players in terms of the networks of international networks investing in the sector. We are also a TA provider, through a sister company called LFS Financial System, which provides basically technical assistance both for our banks and third parties. So a little bit about our figures, just to have an idea of our size. We have an outstanding portfolio of about $1,100 million. And we both operate in microfinance and SME finance. The average disbursement loans for SME finance is around $70,000. When it comes to microfinance, it's around $3,000. You can see the portfolio quality in terms of Part 30 is less than 1%. So we are very proud of these achievements. So we are thinking of going regional, and Latin America is always a very interesting region to go for. So let me tell you a little bit about the Cinderella, story. You start as a microfinance institution, but you want to grow. And growth comes by introducing new products and going into new segments. I'm talking not just about credit products, but I'm talking about savings products and investment products. So if the story goes fine, basically what you do is some sort of transformation maybe into a bank and start operating with accounts and maybe offering some basic financial products in terms of investment, fixed-term deposits maybe, and also maybe start offering more credit products like maybe an overdraft, leasing perhaps. And, if the story goes fine, you continue growing till you become what I call a universal bank. Now, what I refer with a universal bank is not just another commercial bank. It's not being Santander. It's basically being the reference bank for your clients when it comes to all the products they need. And when I'm talking about your clients, I'm focusing both in clients in microcredit clients and small and medium enterprises. So this is maybe where you want to go. Now, the issue is that this story does not always work. And if you look at the trajectories of microfinance institutions in the world, some of them don't make it to, they don't make it. Either sometimes they grow and they become a universal bank, as I was mentioning, or they just become a big MFI, meaning that, you extend your number of branches, but you're still focusing on the same products, one or two products, and focusing on the same segments, Or maybe you don't even grow. You stay where you are, and you don't go anywhere. So what are basically the stones and the challenges in the way? The first thing is the market. Sometimes in some countries, microfinance institutions start competing with banks on a very early stage. So the moment they start focusing maybe on bigger clients is the moment they start competing with commercial banks, which might have better interest rates. When it comes to credit products, or they might have a better network of ATMs. So sometimes in some markets, it's interesting, the competition is not so much with commercial banks, but they are with other universal banks, other microfinance institutions which are quite developed. So another issue is that, it's not the case of Brazil, but in some cases, in some countries, basically there is not such a thing as a big market. Now, other things that are in your way are regulation and legal issues. If you want to take the way of becoming some sort of universal bank, most probably you will have to make some sort of transformation. So you might have to obtain a banking license. You might have to comply with regulatory issues, capital requirements and so on. You might have interest rates caps. So these stones might make you think twice if you really want to go there. The business environment might not be conducted. We have been operating in countries where credit bureaus are not working, the registration of collateral is not possible, and if you have to execute any collateral, it's impossible because the judiciary system doesn't work. Now, also, if you want to become a bigger institution, you have to have money. You have to make a very strong capital investments. Just to tell you, if you have to change your MIS system, your core banking system, that costs you a lot of money, Because if you don't change your core banking system, you might not be able to offer the products you need. So, and maybe it's not so easy to get funding in the country you are operating with, because basically the funding is coming only from the government, but there is no access to private funding that might be much more expensive. But I want also to concentrate on two other issues. One is the management capacity. Jumping and becoming a universal bank means that you need to have a lot of human resource capacity. You have to change the way you think. You have to have a lot, of staff, of new staff, and which are able to, to bring this growth. And these people, including sometimes, the management, don't have the know-how on how to go there. And maybe this know-how is not even possible to obtain locally. So, if there are countries where there is no experience in, let's say, small and medium enterprises for informal clients, so where are you going to get the experience from? And finally, and this happens very often, is maybe your board does not want to go there in the first place, or your senior management. Is it, maybe you're happy where you are, and you don't want to grow anymore, or you just want to become a bigger MFI and you don't want to go in this road of becoming a universal bank. So a question mark here is, where do you want to go? So let me tell you a little bit about, the challenges when it comes to growth and innovation. I think the first one is related to what I call the meta level. The first thing is, if you want to become a bigger institution, if you want to become a universal bank, make sure, first of all, that your governance is in place. Things like, do you have independent directors in your board? Do you have, it cannot be a family business anymore. It cannot be just, run as a small NGO. You have to do a qualitative jump. The other thing is, the strategy should be clear. So it should be clear, where do you want to go? And finally, it's not just about being clear about something, but you have to have the commitment of the boards and the management. Yeah, it's not just an adventure of one day. You will need to start, investing resources for many years before maybe you see the returns. So is your board and your management going to have the patience to do that? So if this is not clear, don't even start. Now, at the second level, as I was mentioning to you, make your research in terms of the market. Because if the market is not inviting, don't even touch it. Yeah? And if the business environment is so bad that you cannot even get, the result of a credit bureau within a reasonable, time, don't start. And finally, if the regulators are not on board, and place against you, so you might have to think twice if you want to go into this segment of SME finance, for example. And finally, at the operational level, is these transformations means that you will need a lot of resources available. The responsibility should be well defined, as well as the priorities, and make sure that you have the know-how on how to go about it. And finally, these things have to be clearly communicated within the organizations. Because if it's not clear to the employees and the middle management, where do you want to go, you might fail because you might have someone playing against you within your own organization. So make sure that you have this checklist before you even think of, going into the next step. Now, what are we talking about when we talk about microfinance? Again, we are not just talking about credit products. We are talking about a universe of financial products that you might want to offer to these microfinance clients and small and medium enterprises. So we are talking about account products, including ATM, cash management, international transfers. We might be talking about overdrafts, trade finance, reverse factoring. And when we are talking about lending products, we might talk about leasing, we might talk about, credit lines, overdraft, and so on. So this is a big universe of financial products that you might want to offer to your clients. Now, given this universe of products, the question is how to go about it. Which products should you be offering first? And I think this is something that also you have to be very clear about. And what we do is we have what we call the funnel model, where we think about all the products that we could offer to our clients, but then, we go for different, we funnel this and we see if they can really go through this funnel. Because if there is no market, for the products, you can even forget it. If the competition is so high in certain products, like fixed term deposit, you might not want to go there in the first place. And finally, if you are a microfinance institution and maybe you want to offer, let's say, current accounts, you might not be able because you need to do a transformation, to go there in the first place. When it comes to internal issues, one of the things is the MIS, the core banking system. Let's change whoever has been working in this sector knows that the transformation, a change of the migration of the core banking system could be a headache. So it could take you years and it could take you millions. So maybe your core banking system is not able to deal with the kind of financial products that you might want to offer to your clients. There are a lot of operational risk, involved. Because if you are offering, let's say, current accounts, you have to have a different procedures, different ways of dealing with this risk. Finally, credit risk. You might have a cannibalization of products by offering one product being substituted of another. One question is if you are available to tap TA funds, technical assistance funds, to develop these new products. And then basically if these products are within your business strategy. So there are a few products actually that can go through this funnel model. And the question is, when you start doing this exercise, please take into account this before you even think about having a new product. So a little bit our approach to innovation. And let's be German here. The best way you can do this is basically by focusing on incremental change. Mercedes is not that it's, launching a new car every year, but they are improving existing cars year by year. So what we do is we reassess our strategy continuously. We make product adjustment continuously, and we are always doing re-engineering of our processes. Maybe it's not fancy. Maybe it's not fancy to start launching products every year. But the thing is, if you can improve the products you have year by year and focus basically on this incremental change, it could be better for you than just jump around. And you have to train your people on these products. So incremental change, year by year, can lead you to a big change after 10 years. So maybe sometimes this is the way around instead of just going for something you don't know. And stay focused as an organization. Sorry to Fernando about this, but there are a lot of fashions going around in terms of financial products. One day they tell you that you have to do credit for women. Another day they tell you that you have to concentrate on rural. Another day, you have to do something else. Don't let the governments or the donors to tell you what you have to do. It has to be a decision of your institution. Where do you want to go? Be sure that that your incentives are aligned with your strategy. Yeah. If you are launching new products, do you have an incentive system for managers to push for these products? And finally, we see ourselves, if we are going to enter a market, we want to be known as the quality leader, the ones changing the markets and the ones setting the standards. Like Mercedes, in the case of our organization, we cannot compete with Chinese cars. We have to be better. So this is one of our keys for success. So finally, I think I want to concentrate on the way we work in terms of thinking globally and acting locally. The first thing is that we concentrate all what we call the knowledge management within competence centers. And we basically have software to do so. And we have regular workshops from all our banks worldwide so that they can learn the lessons, from each other. We have a training center in Berlin, basically, where people from all over the world can come and be trained and discuss, as we are discussing today, for days, technical issues. And what we do a lot, and I would recommend to the extent that is possible, is to exchange stuff. Just send people around from one bank to another, and if you are one institution, you can send people around from one branch to another. That can help a lot, innovating. At the same time, we want to be local. So what we do is we make emphasis that, you know, the products and the market should be locally, basically, we put an emphasis on the local markets. We decentralize decisions so that they can be done quickly. And we do so because we think that if the headquarters is going to take all the decisions for them, the people will not be motivated. So let your branches, take the decisions, but train them to, so that they are able to do so. So that will reduce the burden on the headquarters. Finally, let them a little bit of space for experimentation. You know, one branch or one bank of the organization can come up with ideas that, you know, you can use in other branches or other institutions you have. Finally, I would like to talk about what I call the shifting of paradigm. I mean, something that we have seen in some countries. This is not a policy prescription. What we have seen is, that basically the sector was, the microfinance sector was seen as basically as a social policy focused on the poor people, and with the government being the main provider, with the private sector, through NGOs and some foundations being basically tolerated but not really incentivized, and mostly, focus on microcredit, on small credits. So what we have seen is that now things have changed to a certain extent, where there is a more emphasis on a cooperation between the public and the private sector. So microfinance is not seen anymore as a social policy, but it's seen as a growth policy, and it's not just focused on the low segment, on the poor people, but it's also it's also there is a lot of emphasis on the SME sector, on the small and medium enterprises, where government mostly act as a regulator, although they play also a little bit of a role, and there are specialized micro and SME private-owned banks. Yeah, we are not talking about commercial banks. We are talking about, very specialized institutions which work in this sector. And the other thing is, we have to go out from the idea that microfinance is just credit. We have to go and we have to think of the microfinance sectors as being transfers, inventors, investments, and also lending products. Thank you very much.
Good morning. My name is Jenny Morgan. I'm from the SEEP network, and I will also be presenting in English. So if you have your headsets. Where's the...
Oh, sorry.
Thanks. Okay. So just to introduce who the SEEP network is, we're different from the other presenters up here. We're not an investor. We don't work directly with microfinance institutions or microcredit providers. We are a learning organization. We're a network, an international global network of practitioners that are dedicated to improving economic opportunities for vulnerable populations. So a little bit echoing on what Federico was saying, we see that in many markets, SME and larger institutions are serving a population that needs financial services, but SEEP members are focusing on the vulnerable populations, women, rural, poor, and it's not exclusively through financial services. In fact, it's becoming shifting more to market development and not just focus on financial services. It's a little bit about where our members work, but we are based in Washington, D.C. And a little more about how, as an organization, SEEP works. So our members, who are microfinance associations and networks, but also international NGOs that work in many different areas, have access to other SEEP members, learning opportunities, peer exchanges, conferences, technical resources, and then as a community, they're able to exchange those ideas, and we see them take off, and the larger ideas are replicated at scale. And then the hope is that that in turn can influence the industry at a larger level that goes beyond your local institution, your local network, beyond your region to focus on the industry and improve the lives of vulnerable populations. I want to talk today because I'm here in Brazil working with two associations, Abicred and ABCM. We have representatives here in the room. And this is a donor-funded program. City Foundation and City Brazil have invested in two networks because they see the potential of networks to influence the industry at a larger scale than investing in an individual microfinance institution may have. So this is a little bit about the methodology that SEEP uses when we work with associations. We work on strengthening themselves so that they can provide better services to their members and to the industry, which can include capacity building, information exchange, transparency, analysis of the market, etc. And we do this through facilitating knowledge exchange. So a page from the website. I'm happy to talk more about this later. This is what I would like to focus on today is why networks, why associations. We believe that associations have a powerful role to play in the market, and one way we've seen this is promoting innovation of products and services. It's not so much the individual product or service that I want to focus on, but really why working through networks you can leverage resources, they can work on product design, they can experiment, they can evaluate products, and they can work on this enabling legal and regulatory environments to allow for these new products and services to exist. And they can do this in a more efficient way, perhaps, than individual institutions, financial service providers can, and ideally at a lower cost. They may be able to bring in some donor resources that a financial institution may not have access to for experimenting with new services. I'm going to talk about briefly 3 different cases. Again, the focus is not so much on the product, but more the role of the association. One association we work very closely with, they're on our board, is Red Financiera Rural in Ecuador. This is one of many services and products that they've offered, but here they played a broker role. So they looked at how do we see a market need for mobile banking. Our members are providing many different services, but they're not always getting to everyone they want to reach. So how can we partner with banks, with other large transactional networks to provide the services of our members and provide a mobile banking opportunity? So they did the market research. They looked at who the competitors were. They looked at what would the costs be. Would this make sense for their members to provide? Is this something that they can do at a low enough cost and reach that population? And right now they've been doing this just for a couple years, and Ecuador is a much smaller country, but they've reached close to 400,000 rural Ecuadorians. So again, as microfinance is often very focused on urban populations, how do we reach the rural populations? With traditional banking, it's been very costly and not always effective. So that's one case. Then I'd like to talk about a different model where the network in Peru, they're an association of regulated institutions, worked on more the regulatory framework. So they are the first country in Latin America to implement e-money law. So the first case where they could develop and expand on electronically based mobile financial services. So again, their role was more on how do we make sure that the proper safeguards in place? How do we protect the clients? How do we work with the financial service providers to ensure that there's transparency, but there's privacy, all of the concerns that we have as we bank and we look to where we want to get our own financial services. And the last case, which is probably not, the product itself is not as relevant here in Brazil, but I wanted to highlight it because in Azerbaijan, majority Muslim country, many of the clients are Muslim and they can't take a traditional loan. So their members were struggling with, there's this entire segment of the population that we can't serve. There's clearly high demand. How do we design a product for this type of population? So the network itself worked with lots of different stakeholders, government, public, private. How do we actually reach this sector? And they helped design a methodology and a product that then each of their individual members took, customized, made it their own, applied their own methodologies to, and were able to overcome a lot of the challenges of lending in a Muslim country. And then I want to talk about, so I went from regional to global to now coming back to the local context. The two associations, I believe, are probably represented in this room, but these are some of the practices, promising practices that have come out of our work with them in the last 2.5 years, our collaboration. And it's not just with SEEP as an implementer of a program, it's really giving access to the entire network of other microfinance networks and other members that are inside of our network that I really think has been the key difference. So FRAB SEM is Association of SEMs, and they have worked on many different things, but I wanted to highlight a couple here. Definitely working on advocacy, trying to improve the business environment for SCMs to operate. In terms of capacity building and services to members, they have had these capacity building workshops. One is actually going to be held this week in Florianopolis, the second one. I believe registration's closed, so I'm not advertising for it, but they've done a lot of work in governance with their members, and they're working on a guarantee fund as well. And in terms of market research, we've talked a lot about that, how that's a key role for associations. They've done a diagnostic study of the labor market, something that can benefit all of their members. Oops, I turned that off. Okay. The second association represented here in the front, Oikocredit, which is the association or network of OCPs, the NGOs in Brazil. They too have been doing a lot of work on policy advocacy, working on self-regulation. As they're not formally regulated, they still want to take the initiative and have their members work to self-regulate. Related to that is working on a code of ethics and obviously working on consumer protection issues. And in terms of capacity building and services to members, they held a technology forum in Salvador, which was not only members, but 90 participants attended. They've done a lot of work in governance as well, and they've developed a partnership with BNDES for computer systems to enable their members to use and work on this self-regulation process. And it is a long process. They've worked a lot with organizations in Bolivia and taken examples that have come from around the world of successful self-regulation models and applied them here in Brazil. And lastly, just in terms of, again, how SEEP brings the learning together, it's not only us coming in and showing you practices of what's going on in the rest of the world, but the networks and our members have learned a lot from Brazil as well. We do this in a variety of ways, peer exchanges, but these are two of our key events. So we have network summits where we have, in Latin America, 30 to 40 different associations from all over Mexico all the way down to Paraguay come. And then in September, we have our global summit where we have probably 70 to 80 different microfinance associations represented. And although we work in many different countries and many different regulatory contexts, what we see is there are still a lot of commonalities as markets develop from more nascent markets where microcredit is the only product offered to the more mature markets where it's really about integrated financial services. It's not credit, it's savings, it's mobile banking, it's a whole range of financial services that the same segment of population, the vulnerable population, would like to have access to. And on that note, just leaving you with some research that SEEP has done through our members, just the demand for savings and other financial products far outstrips credit. I think 5 to 1 is something I read most recently. So I think I challenge you all just to think about that. How do we serve this population in a variety of ways? And I believe with that, we will go back to Fernando and their questions. Thank you.
Thank you to all the panelists. I think presentations were very interesting. I'm going to ask a couple of questions, but going to start with one that arises from the presentations we saw. Federico mentioned that SME lending, accompanied with microcredit, was sometimes a good strategy. And one question that arises here is, in the, let's say, optics of financial inclusion, where you are interested in targeting or including segments that are underserved or excluded. These normally tend to be micro-entrepreneurs, but in some of our countries, also some small and medium enterprises are also not receiving all these financial services that are expected. Is it compatible to have SME products together with microcredit, and does this help advance financial inclusion?
Yeah, I think it's not only compatible but necessary. I mean, so what do you do with a client that has been in the, with you for a while as a microcredit client, and then he wants to graduate? Sometimes the issue is that these clients cannot graduate because commercial banks are not able of serving these clients. They can be still informal, bigger micro clients, let's call it big micro instead of SME, and still don't have access to commercial banks. So you accompanying the growth of your client, from micro to SME, it could be a strategy for your institutions. And also it could be a good strategy because, it could bring you another segment and make your institution more profitable. So definitely, SMEs are sometimes, or most of the time, excluded from financial services or more complex financial services because commercial banks are not interested to work with them in the first place. So that's my answer.
Okay, a question here to Marisol on the experience of Bolivia, which is related to the question that we posed to Federico about combining micro and SME lending. Does any institution, can any institution do both things at a time, or there are certain minimum requirements that a microfinance institution must have before venturing into SME lending? We have seen cases where a small institution doing microcredit moves upstream, and managing that other product is not something that easy and might result in the MFI actually generating more problems to the institution rather than solving them. But in the case of Bolivia, for example, you are part of the board of FIE, and they were able to move upstream as well. But are there any sort of minimum conditions that one should have?
Alô? Bom, o que aconteceu na Bolívia com as entidades microfinanceiras foi que elas foram crescendo e os clientes também foram crescendo. Então, no outro lado estava a banca comercial, e a banca comercial estava muito atenta para ver aqueles clientes que cresciam e que iam abandonar as entidades microfinanceiras. No Banco FIE, o Banco FIE teve que se preparar para atender aqueles microempresários que depois se tornaram em pequenos e medianos empresários. Mas é um reto para a própria entidade, no sentido, primeiro, financeiro, tem que ter muito mais capital, tem que ter também muito mais governança, unidades especializadas, não só na parte do crédito, mas outros serviços que o mesmo cliente vai demandar. E principalmente relacionado ao desenvolvimento de uma unidade integral para o tema de riscos. É um reto, mas não é incompatível, é um crescimento natural do mercado, é um crescimento natural da mesma entidade. É também uma forma de diversificar os riscos. Por outro lado, uma coisa importante de mencionar, de dizer, é que as SMEs são o motor também do desenvolvimento econômico no país. Por um lado, nós temos os microempresários, mas uma grande quantidade de população categorizada como microempresários, mas o aporte ao PIB não é tão grande como o aporte ao PIB por parte das SMEs. Então, também uma estratégia política é que as instituições microfinanceiras trabalhem com SMEs pelo impacto econômico no crescimento do país.
Thank you. So I understand from what you're saying that as you accompany the clients, the institution itself has also become stronger over time, and that probably, you know, a small institution is not the best fit to do an SME lending, but it should be part of a progress in the development of microfinance institutions.
You don't want to lose your clients, of course, and you want to accompany them through all time.
Mm-hmm. Jenny, in terms of what factors help some of the institutions that you have seen, the microfinance institutions that have grown, that are part of the networks that you support, what sort of other products or services do they normally engage in? Is it possible to diversify your product base without being a regulated institution, or both things have to come hand in hand?
So I'm going to speak again from the perspective of the networks and microfinance networks and associations, and echoing a little what Federico was saying, you know, they really work at the meso level. So they're working on market development, they're working on enabling regulatory environments. And I think that there have been many challenges that I've seen that our associations have faced. You know, in Ecuador, there's interest rate caps. So how do you operate in that kind of environment? An example maybe of a partnership that worked really well there, as well as there were credit bureaus. Just like in the United States, we have 3 different credit bureaus, privately owned, not affiliated with the government. And they were in a situation where none of the credit bureaus wanted to really take the information from their MFIs. So while we're promoting transparency and consumer protection, and it's also a huge addition to your credit methodology, the credit bureaus weren't very interested. This was a while back. Well, the association brokered a partnership with Equifax for them to accept the information on these small loans from their institutions. And not only did that take off, they were able to figure out a business model so that their members were able to pay for the credit information at a low cost, but it also provided a source of revenue for the association to support itself. And it was a lot of work on brokering, and it did take a lot of time to establish. But now in Ecuador, that's the leading credit bureau information in the entire country, and I think it is in large part to this partnership that the association was able to develop. So, you know, that is a way that they have contributed to advancing the operations of their members.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I have another question for Federico. Can you explain that funnel model that you shown us? How does it work for, in practice, for choosing products?
Yes, again, I mean, when we are thinking of launching products, I mean, when we always think in terms of this funnel model, I mean, it's like, you know, people, especially, you know, governments, donors, and even within the organization, they come up with great ideas about products, but when you think twice about it, I mean, you cannot launch them. So I think it's important to have a methodological framework to do so, and this is what the funnel is. It is trying to basically identify those variables that might make the launching of the product possible or not. You can say, great, I'm going to offer, let's say, overdraft for your clients, and then you go, and you develop the whole product, and then afterwards, it's only when you start, talking with your IT department to discover that your core banking system is, not able to work with this product. So work with a methodological framework when you're launching products, so that it's easy to identify those products that can be developed from those who cannot, at least in the short term.
Thank you. By the way, if you're interested in questions, as I mentioned before, you could write them up and send them forward. We can take questions from the audience if needed as well. Marisol, you mentioned that in the experience of Bolivia, they started with group lending and eventually moved to individual lending, and now I believe that a large proportion of microcredit in Bolivia is via individual lending. Is that something that normally has to take place, or can you really grow with a group product? For example, here, the Credit Amigo, I think, operates mostly with a solidarity lending model. Is it that each country has its own model, or normally you would expect, as the institutions grow, to have move from one type of product to the other?
No, English? I'm sorry. Usually in the most poorest countries, you start first with models as village banking models or associative loans, because you start always placing very little loans to those poor people. But when we are looking at the Latin American region, what we can see is that it depends on the conditions of the economy of the country. And in the case of Bolivia, we had entities that they started with village banking at the beginning, but at the same time we had other institutions as Banco FIE that they started with individual technology. Through the time, nevertheless, through the time, you will see that many entities will migrate from village banking or associative loans to individual loans. Why? Because there is less risk. You can assess a client directly. You will know him better individually, and you can make a better follow-up of that client. I have to say also, Fernando, that that's a pity. Why? Because as many entities migrate from associative or village banking loans to individual loans, that also means that they are placing bigger loans amount, and also they are leaving behind other type of clients who usually are people that come from very poor sectors under the poverty level, and usually most of those people, they are women. So while the entities migrate to other methodologies, there is an important, let's say, negative impact if you look socially.
I think I agree with your point, and just to add, as I mentioned, many SEEP members focused on financial services, not only credit, and also beyond. And a lot of members are working on village savings. So it's a way to be able to continue that relationship and reach the really vulnerable, the women, the rural, but offering a product that is more appropriate to their needs. And so that's, we see that a lot in Africa, but it's a movement that's really been taking off among the SEEP membership, at least.
Thank you. One question to Federico. You work with different, your network has different institutions in different countries. So when you want to, let's say, grow and innovate new products, how do you go about, transferring that know-how from one institution to the other to make sure that this is relevant to their context? There must be a process probably that you follow. Could you explain about that?
Yeah, basically knowledge travels with us. I mean, on one hand, we bring the expertise by bringing the people from other banks of our network to the country where we are starting operations. I mean, on the other hand, we make a lot of emphasis on what we were discussing on exchange of information by, even if the people are new in institutions, that we are starting is by sending these people to other institutions so that they see how we work, in those other countries. So making sure that there is a good flow of knowledge through your organization is, I think, key. I mean, everybody talks about knowledge management, but I have seen very few organizations where they systematically do something about it in terms of, the different instruments you might have for this, like, having, for example, a knowledge software. Yeah, I mean, if one of my heads of SME in one country says, Federico, can you give me the policy from Tanzania? I mean, he can have access to those policies within a minute. If he needs, can you tell me about the incentive schemes? Okay, so go and check what they do in Azerbaijan. And things like that. I mean, you have to make sure that the knowledge in your organization is not, centralized in a few people, yeah, or in a branch or in the management. So the challenge for you is how you can make sure that the knowledge goes around so that you think globally and you think and you apply the knowledge locally. And I think this is the challenge we have, and that's the reason why we always make emphasis on transferring of knowledge from all the network of our institutions. And I think this is maybe the big advantage we have with other institutions that cannot just have other examples because they are in their small world.
Thank you, Federico. We will proceed to read some of the questions that come from the audience and maybe complement with other questions. There's one to Jenny that says that in Brazil, NGOs do mostly microcredit. What opportunities do you see for them to implement other products? And maybe complementing that also, in your presentation, you talked about the importance of self-regulation for networks to be able to, for the NGOs to be able to apply self-regulation. What sort of incentives should they have? Yeah.
I would actually like to have someone else answer this question, if you'll allow me, because I could speak a little bit about the work that I've done here and the work that I've seen in other regions where self-regulation has been a really powerful way for NGOs to advance their work. But if I could ask Almir just to come up here for a minute, or unless that was your question.
No, just try to do your best.
No, I would just, because I think he could speak much better to the point of NGOs here in Brazil. Can you allow me? Is that okay?
I would prefer to keep this question among the panelists, and if
okay. I think that was his question, probably.
Mm-hmm.
So, as I mentioned in my presentation, it's not uncommon that NGOs begin as providing service and providing credit. And again, as we see, we're markets where they're trying to reach a certain population, a vulnerable population. Microcredit is a methodology and a tool that has been proven successfully to work in many other countries, and not just Latin America, all over Asia, et cetera. We all know this. That's not the question. It's more, how do we create an environment where NGOs, whether it means they have to regulate, whether it means they are able to provide microcredit plus services so that they continue to serve the same vulnerable population. Because as Marisol was saying, sometimes when you try to stay with your clients and they move up, you need to be able to provide different services. But at other times we see there's a certain segment of the population that for whom credit may never really solve the problems. Credit may not be the right tool. It may not be about a loan. It's more about an insurance product. We've seen micro pension products. We've seen, obviously I've talked a lot about savings, but these have been very successful products where, again, going back to Ecuador, a microinsurance product that isn't just about securing the loan. It's really a life insurance product that clients can keep even after they're no longer clients of the microfinance institution. And this is very rare. I haven't seen this in many other countries because at the end of the day, that is the product they want. They don't just want an insurance product that guarantees the financial institution is repaid were they to die during taking out this loan. So I think that's the way we need to think. I can't say exactly how and what we need to do in Brazil to get there, but I've seen very many successful cases, and I think that it's possible.
I would like to add a little bit on this. I mean, what I have seen in other countries is that, you don't need to be a commercial bank in other countries in order to be able to offer simple savings and accounts to your clients. And the problem is, that in many countries, the microcredit institutions just can offer credit products, but they are not able to offer any saving products or any accounts because basically they are not allowed by the central banks. And I think, and I believe, of course, if I will be the regulator, I will be, very concerned because, if these microfinance institutions have the money of the people, it's a little bit on the dangerous side. But I believe if you do it in the right way, and I think there are many examples worldwide, I mean, these microfinance institutions can really offer some basic savings and accounts products, and that will make, I think that will make this institution more interesting, especially if you think about, poverty alleviation. It's not just about credit, it's about savings as well.
I think Marisol also wanted to comment on this.
Eu queria contar uma anedota que eu acho que é importante. Quando eu trabalhava no Ministério da Fazenda, muitos anos atrás, essa era a pergunta de rigor das ONGs na Bolívia, né? O que nós podemos fazer a parte do crédito? E não podia fazer mais nada. A regulação não permitia fazer mais nada. Mas, dentro do crédito, o crédito permite que as organizações cresçam conjunto com os seus clientes. E eu acho que o importante que vocês podem fazer é trabalhar internamente na parte da governabilidade, não sei se se diz governabilidade ou governança, estou confundida, mas isso tem que ver também com a criação das unidades de gestão de risco integral, temas de auditoria interna, o desenvolvimento dos órgãos retores da mesma entidade, como os diretórios, as mesmas políticas internas. Tudo isso levou a que as ONGs na Bolívia, no momento adequado, permitiram que o ente regulador baixasse a normativa e permitisse a elas se incorporar em outro tipo de atividades. Agora, as ONGs não são mais conhecidas como ONGs. A nova denominação são instituições de desenvolvimento financeiro. Elas podem também operar com poupança e com outros tipos de operações. Mas é importante, o que nós dissemos é engordar, crescer junto aos clientes para poder assumir também novos retos.
Thank you very much. There are a couple of questions, some for Marisol and another for Federico. For Marisol, there's a question that says, how many of the clients have a share of shallot? What sort of products, normally, how many products does one client have? What sort of product variety does a typical client have? And how is one institution able to balance the cost of doing a personalized administration of each client to cater its specific services, knowing that the costs of the relationship with the client are very expensive normally?
Bom, à medida que as entidades microfinanceiras vão crescendo, o cliente vai demandando novos produtos, como ser tema de crédito para moradia e crédito de consumo também. O cliente quer comprar uma televisão, uma rádio, um carrinho, alguma coisa assim. Então, as entidades têm que também desenvolver outro tipo de produto creditício, acorde com aquela demanda. Mas nós continuamos falando que é dentro do conceito do microcrédito, porque nós estamos atendendo aquele setor da população. É importante entender quais são as demandas do nosso cliente. O Brasil é imenso. Eu não posso nem imaginar as diferentes demandas só vendo os diferentes estados do Brasil. Deve ser muito diferente o norte do sul, o centro, não sei. Mas temos que tratar de entender qual é a verdadeira necessidade. Por outro lado, atender aos microempresários, aquele pequeno cliente, é muito custoso. Então, o que a entidade tem que fazer é continuar crescendo. Mientras mais carteira genere, vai ter melhores resultados. Os resultados vão ser positivos. Mas, se eu mantenho um nível de clientes pequenos, os meus custos vão ser muito altos. Na Bolívia, os custos operativos têm descido constantemente. Atualmente, se vocês olham a data, vão ver que os custos operativos são uns dos mais baixos da região. Isso tem permitido baixar os juros que as entidades cobram ao cliente. E só é possível isso, como eu disse, incrementando a clientela com produtos e metodologias acorde à demanda.
Obrigado. There was one more question to you, very short, I guess, but someone was curious about what's the portfolio at risk of the sector in Bolivia.
Como você dizia? O risco, não? A carteira de risco na Bolívia é muito baixa. Atualmente, o promédio é menor a 2,5. Também é uma dos indicadores mais baixos da região.
Thank you. There was another question before we wrap up. A last question for Federico, which is what is the big challenge that an institution faces to transform from a microfinance institution to a commercial bank, noting that there are several limitations in terms of the products that some OCPs or SEMs can offer here due to the limitations of the regulation.
So I could go for an easy answer and say, the problem is the central bank. But it's not, the central bank. I mean, they take their time. We know in most of the countries. But the question is also, first, do you want to transform into a bank, your management? Because if you're coming from the NGO or if you're coming from, let's say, the perspective of a foundation, maybe, the owners of the institutions, I mean, the major stakeholders of the institutions don't want to go there. So I think first is that. And second, it takes a lot, I mean, to transform into a banking institution, yeah? I mean, you have to rework all your processes, you have to rethink all your products, you might have to change your core banking system, you might have to contract a lot of people, and it will take you a lot of, capital to do so. So if you don't have that in mind when you're thinking on basically on doing the jump, I mean, from an NGO or foundation into a bank, don't do it. I mean, but again, I think it's easy always to blame someone else, although I think that, I don't know how the central banks works here in Brazil, but in some countries it takes us years, I mean, because also the times of the central bank are not, your own timing. So, trying to arrange, on talking with the central bank in a very early stage might help. But again, you have to really want, and you have to understand what it takes, to do that step.
Thank you. As we're getting close to the end of the panel, I'm going to ask a question to the three panelists, and which do you think are the main challenges for the expansion of microcredit in Brazil? I don't know who wants to take up the question.
You already asked me that question. You already asked me that question.
Okay, so Marisol, you want to try that?
Eu não sou uma experta no mercado brasileiro, no mercado das microfinanças, mas eu considero que para o desenvolvimento do setor se deve tomar em conta lições aprendidas em outros países da América Latina. E elas estão relacionadas com que a regulação e as normas não devem ser restritivas para impulsar o mercado. Deve existir um compromisso social das instituições microfinanceiras e uma concertação entre privados, o governo e a cooperação que possibilita a atração de capitais privados e internacionais para fomentar o setor. Também, por outro lado, a penetração nas áreas rurais vão sempre requerer maiores esforços e investimentos, a necessidade de impulsar outros instrumentos complementares, como Jenny já falou, entre os que estão fundos de garantia, seguros agrícolas, microseguros, redes, serviços de assistência técnica. E, finalmente, a indústria da microfinanças tem que ser flexível e reinventar-se continuamente.
Obrigado.
I won't take long. No, I just wanted to say that I think there's a huge demand, from what I know, for financial services in this country, and I think that there is also a huge realm of financial service providers. And I think that there's room for everyone, and I know that I am not an expert on the regulatory environment, but there's definitely room for NGOs, regulated institutions, et cetera, and there's still more demand than we can meet. So I think it's to echo what Marisol was saying, you know, it's thinking about the types of institutions, the clients that you're serving, offering the right product mix and partnering, because you can't do it alone as a single institution. So,
Thank you.
Maybe a last comment on this one. I think, you know, my experience is that the bigger the country, the less they are looking for experiences abroad. Because, you know, your country is big, and then you think, okay, so I have everything within my country, I don't need to look around. I mean, especially, you know, other small countries, you know, you don't want to learn about Bangladesh, or you don't want to learn about Rwanda. I mean, these guys are too small. But believe me, it's really worth doing that. I mean, it's really worth looking at what's going on outside, you know, your own country, and how can this be done? First, you know, you know, I'm not going to make some advertisement for you, but the thing is, international organizations, multilateral organizations can bring you some of this knowledge. You know, they can provide technical assistance so that you can learn from other countries. On the other hand, I think that, you know, letting international organizations like us, entering the country brings you a different player with a different maybe mindset that might be enriching your own, you know, your own financial system. So it's not just about the resources. Let the knowledge come to your country, either through technical assistance, SEEPs, I mean multilateral organizations, or even by providing the space for other players which are coming from outside.
Thank you very much to all the speakers. I think we're coming to an end. This was a panel with a very broad and interesting topic and different types of institutions that are being represented here. Maybe summing up is a little bit difficult, but what I would say is one of the important things that the institutions should try to do is to try to diversify the range of products that they offer. If it's just credit, to try to you know, widen the array of services that they do with credit, or try to engage in other types of products. Another important thing, for example, one of them could be SME, but I believe you know, each institution should be aware of what capacity they have to lend and to reach clients and capital. It's also important to, I would say, to try to reach growth, and for that, it's important. Regulations are very important to allow institutions to be able to move gradually from one stage to the other, so that they can get capital, as was the case in Bolivia, and gradually expand the ranges of products and services. It's also very important, from what the panelists say, that in the presentations, that the organization itself is well structured. There were some ideas in the presentation that Federico did of Access Holding. But in general, you know, the challenge is there. Try to learn from other experiences abroad, or experiences that in Brazil are also working. I mean, we know of a couple of organizations that are doing interesting things that you know, maybe other MFIs should learn from Brazil itself. Having said this, I want to thank you very much for all your time and patience. There will be a lunch. There will also be some evaluation forms, which I would appreciate if you could fill out. Thank you very much.